Welcome, everyone. My name is Christina McClellan. I am the Education Manager for AEIVA, the Abrams Engle Institute for the Visual Arts. So if this is your first time joining us, welcome. We are a visual arts center located on the campus of the University of Alabama at Birmingham. We present 8 to 10 exhibitions a year, highlighting a mix of regionally, nationally, and internationally acclaimed artists, focused almost exclusively on contemporary art. We serve a diverse audience of university faculty, staff, and students, but also artists, museum patrons, and donors. We help represent the visual arts at UAB to local and regional institutions, but also the national and international art community, while simultaneously striving to keep our exhibitions directly relevant and engaging to our surrounding Birmingham communities. Since opening in 2014, AEIVA has been featured in publications such as the New York Times, Huffington Post, Nation, Raw Vision Magazine, PBS Canvas, and we are very proud that our exhibitions and related educational programming are free and open to the public. So tonight is our Outside the Lines live coloring night with AEIVA. A quick shout out to our Student Arts Council. This was one of their ideas, and we're actually joined by one of our Student Arts Council members tonight. So before I want to get started, a few quick housekeeping notes. Please note that discriminatory or hate language of any kind will not be tolerated. The session is being recorded, but no, the recordings are largely the screen shares. So we want to encourage you, if you feel comfortable, turn on your screens. It's a night to decompress, color, and participate in a discussion about art. So we really encourage you guys to ask questions. At the bottom of your screen is a chat feature. Drop any questions you have there, and Madeline Rates, our Student Arts Council member, will ask them as time allows. So before we get to tonight's event, the Visual and Performing Arts, which we are a part of here at UAB, has had an exciting season, and it will keep continuing all the way through December. As you came in from the weight room, there were a lot of announcements kind of going through on the screen. So the Al Stevens Center has several interesting performances coming up. Arts and Medicine continues their virtual Mental Health Mondays. Art Play has an upcoming Lunch and Learn virtual series. And at AEIVA, we have 2 really exciting events next week that are both hybrid, that go with our Marking Time Art in the Age of Mass Incarceration exhibition. So that is a mock trial where the UAB's mock trial team will put mass incarceration on trial. And then we also have a spoken word event on Thursday. So the mock trial is on Wednesday, spoken word is on Thursday, and that will be Department of English students who have created poems and spoken word based on the artwork in the exhibition, and then that they will be accompanied by alumni of the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute's Youth Legacy Program, who will be reading excerpts of the Liberated Voices blog by the Jefferson County Memorial Project. So again, both of these are hybrid. Navigate to our website to sign up for either in person or online. So this is our last virtual coloring night of the semester, and we'll be back virtually in the spring. However, if you are a UAB faculty, staff, or student, be sure to join us on December 1st at noon. We are going to have a special in-person lunch and learn / coloring night at the Hill Center featuring Alex McClurg. So that's going to be December 1st. So if you're at UAB and able to join us, we would love to join you. So welcome, everybody. But first, we're going to meet Natalie Harrison, who is our guest artist for tonight. And if you are coloring anything tonight or working on an art project, as I introduce her, you're welcome to show us, hold up to the screen. We've got it in grid view. So if you want to show us what you're about to work on, that's wonderful. So to introduce Natalie, as an artist, Natalie Harrison is drawn to the aesthetic qualities of jewelry, the color texture, variety, and the association with the female body. Natalie manipulates and molds paint into bead, lace, and floral forms, each mold consistent yet individual collaged together to create a tapestry of paint, focusing the viewer's attention rather than viewing each as an addition or embellishment. Natalie holds a BFA from Middle Tennessee State University and a MFA in painting and drawing from the University of Tennessee. She's exhibited throughout Tennessee, Georgia, and Alabama, and is currently based here in Birmingham, where she's the program coordinator and instructor at Samford University's School of the Arts. in the Department of Art and Design. So welcome, Natalie. I am going to go ahead and share tonight's PowerPoint. There you go. So welcome. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. I'm really looking forward to this because your stuff is so incredibly interesting. So as we get started, how about you just tell us what got you into art?
Okay. So I feel like I'm not one of those people that like grabbed a crayon as soon as possible sort of thing. I think it sort of, I landed in it a little bit. I was lucky enough to be selected in like a magnet school lottery to go to an arts middle school. And they made everybody do everything, basically music, theater, dance, and visual art. And I did a little bit of music, wasn't great. Definitely not good at theater. And probably not really dance either. So I don't know if sort of by default I ended up in art, but it just sort of stuck with me from then. So from there, I kind of was grandfathered in to go to the arts high school. And so just kept doing that. I wouldn't say it sounds maybe nicer than it is, but like, I don't know that I had like amazing art teachers or anything like that, but it was more like just consistently being in art classes that kind of just, I stuck with it and then ended up going to MTSU and getting my BFA. I studied specifically painting, and I had a minor in printmaking. So these are actually a few paintings from then. I commuted a lot. So this is actually grad school. The previous slide is just the undergrad, and I commuted a lot, and so that was kind of what inspired me to make a lot of these sort of landscape paintings. But ultimately, I really just loved the material and loved painting, and this was just sort of like the direction I went to explore the material. So in the next slide, this is where I sort of was still in that realm, but now in grad school, this was actually right after the really bad flood in Nashville. So I started kind of doing some work about natural disasters. I had a friend that drowned as well around this time. So plenty of content to kind of work with, but again, really still investigating materials.
So was as you moved from high school, or like deciding to go to the arts high school and then moving on into college, like what role did art start to play for you? Was it an outlet to kind of express something or to explore something? What role did it start to play?
Yeah, I think definitely an outlet. I don't know. Working in a school now, I see all these students that are like, I want to do this and this and this and this, and I'm like, oh, I just kind of wanted to do this. Like, I don't really have a backup or a plan C and D. So yeah, it just was kind of just like it turned into something that was just a part of me, and that I kept doing whether I was in school or not. So in grad school, time is kind of weird. I feel like I just made a ton of work, and this is probably not that much time passed between the previous two paintings, but they're quite different. But I started kind of exploring ideas about painting in general and kind of what is a painting, and was again ultimately the kind of common thread through all of my work even now is the material. So some of these things, like the on the right is kind of a painting that happened on the drop plastic while I was possibly even making the painting on the left. I'm not sure anymore, but so always looking for things like that, things that kind of happen without a lot of planning. This is a gallery view of one of the student galleries at UT. This was probably my first actual solo show. So yeah.
So, you start going towards this more kind of sculptural type painting, and I know that really going into jewelry in particular. So I know you're into texture and everything. What kind of influences that desire to move more towards fabric, and you call some of your paintings now tapestries or things like that? What moved you into that realm?
I think it's a combination of a lot of experimenting, but also just again being drawn to materials. So really attracted to different patterns and fabrics, and it's just kind of another material to play with and see how it can be manipulated. So the paint, like in this piece, the paint sort of holds it into this form. So I was really still kind of, I guess still am, thinking about the idea of what is a painting. And so this is literally paint on fabric, like a traditional painting, but if you look at it, you may not necessarily think that's a painting. So I think that's kind of an interesting kind of contrast. But these are the first couple pieces where I started playing with the molding the paint. And when I was in school, mostly all of the experiments with that were kind of embellishing, adding these forms to the fabric, kind of letting them be a part of the piece, but not as kind of a standalone like they are now.
So can you tell us how you started getting into this process, and then where that process is today as we start going into some of your more current works?
Sure. Well, I think the first thing I tried was I had these silicone like cupcake things or cupcake or muffin like
Trays?
Yeah, and that was not super successful. Way too large, and so, but it sort of started that. I still am really drawn to like when I have like a paint palette or even like a plastic like yogurt container that has dried paint in it and peeling it out. So I think that's really where it started. Like, oh, I can, this is kind of happening without me trying, but I could kind of take this idea and do something on purpose.
Mm-hmm. And so you started.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
This is actually after graduate school. After I kind of got my bearings and got a studio again here.
So textile really, I guess my other question was going into why drawn specifically to things that are basically kind of in that realm of fashion. So how did you start going to that, and then where does that live for you now?
I think it's kind of a funny thing, like looking at this, I really love using pink. I don't consider myself super girly, but I think, yeah, and there's glitter in this. Like I'm able to kind of channel a lot of that in my work. And, you know, for a long time, I would never think like glitter is a serious material to use. So I think it kind of just all comes from that like attraction to like girly, feminine ideas and materials, and but then like wrapping that into ideas of painting.
So as we start to flip through, because we're still in, you said just after grad school, once you've gotten here, how did you really start showing your work, and what really has propelled your career forward? This is a question I often hear from students, like, how do I start showing? How do I basically start my career? So how did it work out for you? Was it festivals, or mostly gallery showings, or Instagram? What has really kind of helped you?
Yeah, so when I was in grad school, I got my first iPhone, um, and that was kind of when, yeah, like social media. I mean, Facebook had been around, but Instagram was becoming more popular, and it just makes everything so accessible, like with other artists. So I think really social media has a lot to do with it. But then also I just apply to a lot of things, a lot of shows. I don't do a ton of festival type events just because I don't know if my work necessarily translates that way. I think it sort of needs like a gallery wall and like some space, and less like a booth or a table. But yeah, social media has been great as far as interacting with people from all over the country. And, I was talking to somebody maybe yesterday about reaching out. I reached out to an artist that I was a huge fan of on Instagram when I was in school, and she responded, and we kind of talked back and forth. And then when I went to New York, we went and visited her studio, and I don't know. I think you may not think that it is okay to just try to talk to somebody like that, but the worst that can happen is they ignore you. So
I specifically remember we were at the opening for the Vinegar Project's, what was that, the Airbnb thing, and they turned it into a gallery, and someone came up to you and was like, I follow you on Instagram. And they had come specifically to the gallery to see you. And then I think for me, that was a moment where I was like, okay, Instagram has really become a tool for artists.
I have a lot. We have a lot of conversations where it's like, oh, like I know your work. I don't recognize you, but I recognize your work. So it's almost like a weird. I don't really use it for selfies and things like that, but I probably should do that a bit more, so that it's like this person goes with this work.
Like recognizing somebody based on their dog on the sidewalk. You know
Yes.
the dog, and you know the
Yes.
dog's name. But
Exactly.
maybe not necessarily theirs. I guess for any of the students on the call, Instagram has become such a big thing where even our own curators are finding artists and that they're interested in and may want to have a show with through Instagram as well. So that's, and I knew that you have a big Instagram presence as well. And it also allows you to see some of these details. So where are we at in your kind of career here?
This painting, this is from a solo show I did at Sanford, kind of near when I started. Um, so this may be 2018 at this point. But this is one of the first paintings where I started doing like the all over beaded forms and working within this type of frame. So this was in that same show.
What, why do you just, how do you, let me get that question better. How do you decide on the colors? So you have really bright ones like this, and then you have that are all kind of in that green spectrum, and then the same with the previous one in the blue. But then our next one is just browns and whites and tans. So what influences your choice in colors? Is it the molds that you're using? Is it, what influences that?
So it's a few things. Sometimes I because I have some that are just sort of every color too. So sometimes I just kind of like to set like a parameter for myself, like, oh, this one's going to be all blue. And then I just kind of make a ton of blue and then figure out where to go from there. Some things like that previous piece, I think, was kind of like a little bit inspired by my husband's work. He works very geometrically, and we've talked about like he now uses a lot of pink in his work, and so it's sort of I think happens just with us talking to each other a lot about our paintings.
So y'all are influencing each other too.
Definitely.
So is this from the same show as well?
Yes.
Okay. I want to move on now to this one because I thought it was a great example of, we were talking about how you make it with molds. So can you go into that process a little bit more about, how you get from, just raw paint into the molds and then onto the actual piece?
So I've used a ton of molds. When I first started, I was using these plastic molds that were really hard to peel the paint out of. And now I use silicone. Some of them are for cake decorating. Some are like chocolate molds. And then I've made a few myself, just like cast little pieces of different things. Like I've cast some jewelry. So one of the coloring sheet pieces, the mound, the circle, the biggest kind of piece in that is one that I made. It's like I cast a bracelet. But yeah, basically I just put a lot of paint into these molds and let it dry, depending on how deep they are and how what the weather is and things like that. Depends on the drying time. And sometimes I pull them out before they're all the way dry. Like on this one, you can see some of them where the paint's sort of sticking up. That's because the paint wasn't all the way dry when I pulled them out, and that's intentional. I don't want it to not look like paint. So sometimes I kind of play with that. Like I'm okay with some of them looking really sort of pristine, but I want them all to be different.
Yeah, so some of it's purposeful, and giving that kind of three-dimensionality. Why do you decide, so you referenced the coloring sheet one, which I know we're going to see the picture of here in a bit, but you have a lot that are rectangles or squares, and then that coloring sheet one almost seems to be, is it a mound that comes kind of off the wall? How do you decide on, okay, I'm going to do the squares or rectangles or the mounds, or what causes you to make it even more three-dimensional than it's going to be?
So this is another sort of process image. The mounds, I really kind of just dove into doing those for a while, about a year. Just wanted to try something else, and but again was like, oh well, it's still basically just paint on wood, even though it's, you know, taking on a different shape. It's not flat. But I've really come back to the flat. I think it helps to, again, sort of have like a bit of containment to it, and then I can let, you know, some pieces kind of go a little bit beyond the edge of the frame if I want to.
Hey guys, so we actually have a question in the chat.
Yeah.
And this is actually, it's a few questions in one. So it's, do you prefer working on flat or rounded surfaces? And then it's like most of your work is sort of on like an intimate scale. In what way would you like to work larger? And what is the largest work you've completed until this point?
Okay, so yeah, I definitely have come back to the flat panels. I don't know. I'm more than going back to the mounds. I'm interested in maybe going back to the fabric a little bit, but I haven't done that yet. The largest of these that I've done is, I think, 30 inches by 24. It gets tricky because they get quite heavy because it's solid paint. And then it also obviously expensive with solid paint. So I don't know. In grad school, I did a lot of larger work, and now it's, even though my work is not huge, I still like am sort of drowning in it because it's just like can't stop making stuff. So I don't know if I really have room to make super large work anyway, or money.
Storage is a problem.
Yes.
And then what was the third question? Was there a third one beyond that?
I think we kind of talked about it, but like, would you like to work larger? Yeah, I think you hit on that one.
Okay. Okay, good. But why is it important to you to have been coming back to that flat? I know you kind of sort of covered it, but why do you think you're really drawn to that flat surface? Because it's still three-dimensional with that.
It's a little bit different in the way that the viewer interacts with the flat piece versus the rounded mound. You can kind of take it all in more at once. This is one of those a little bit larger 24 by 30 pieces. But also when it's on a flat surface, but then it's all the pieces themselves are really dimensional, then I think that's a nice contrast too. This is from Low Mill a couple of years ago.
So you had mentioned earlier about being at Samford and then showing there. How did you decide to go into academia? And then, you know, what is your role? How often do you teach?
So I've always just tried to have a job in the arts in some form. So through school, undergrad and grad school, and after, I've worked at different art supply stores. And then I've adjuncted. I adjuncted at UAB for 2 years. And then I really like teaching, but it's a lot of times with faculty positions, you have to kind of be willing to up and move across the country to do that. So I kind of like being here. So I right now am working as the program coordinator at Stanford in the art department and do all kinds of stuff. Working in the gallery and just all the management of everything, pretty much. So I teach one class a semester. This semester, I'm teaching mixed media. So I actually brought all of my fabric storage because I haven't been using it, and my students have been using it, and it's been really well. I took some of the stuff out. I just couldn't part with it, but most of it I let them go through, and it's been really fun to see that, like things that I've just kind of collected over a decade, and now it's being used and in a way that like I wouldn't have used it or expected it to be used.
Hey guys, we actually have another question in the chat. Someone is wondering, how big is this rose painting?
This is 11 by 14. So the individual roses are probably like, I don't know, like a silver dollar, maybe a silver dollar size.
That's great. So I had a question then about going back to the students. Do you ever draw inspiration from them, or do you see an influence of teaching in your work? And then second question is, what's your favorite class to teach?
So usually I have taught in the past foundations classes like beginning drawing and 2D design, 3D design. So that's a little bit more technical and less experimental. It's fun in a different way because you can see the progress in the students really quickly because it just sort of clicks with them. But yeah, I think mixed media this semester has been awesome because it's more, in line with my art practice, and they definitely have inspired me, and I already have plans for future assignments the next time I get to teach it, and sort of trying to cram a lot in. It's like too many ideas.
And then you may go back to using fabric as well now that they're using it.
Yeah, definitely like unearthing all of that has further made me want to get back into the fabric. But I definitely would continue with paint in it in some way.
So are you more project-based, or do your series evolve more organically? And then do you see them as a series even?
Yeah, I would say it's a little bit more organic. Sometimes if I have a show coming up, then I may have 50% of the work and need to make 50% new work. But I think because of the time factor, and I can't just like crank it all out in a couple weeks. So it's really just kind of like a constant, consistent process.
How long does it take to make, say, this particular piece here versus one that had a little bit more texture like this one?
So this one took a long time, more of my fault because it's so silly now that I'm thinking about it, but I had only like 2 of the molds of the rose, so I would have to wait for it to dry and then take it out and then put more in. And so it's more of that than the actual assembling that takes the longest, at least when the pieces are big like this. So who knows how long it actually took, but usually I'm working on multiple pieces at once so that I'm not going crazy.
Just sitting around.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Madeline.
We have another question in the chat. So the question is, do you embrace the mistakes or in the crude molds found in some of your works like the rose, or do you attempt to create more of like a uniform or uninterrupted surface?
Yeah, so I think this one is a pretty good example of including the ones that didn't necessarily come out in that full heart shape. And that kind of goes back to I don't, even though I sometimes refer to them as beads, like I don't want them to look like plastic beads. I want them to be like, oh, this kind of looks like that, but it's paint. It looks like paint too. Or if I look closer, I can see that it's paint. So I think the whether they're mistakes or just kind of, I don't even know if I think of them as mistakes. It's just some turn out, really pristine and some don't.
So, where are you at this point? Because we oscillate between the really textured ones, like the roses, and then the hearts, and then you have a whole set that are squares, and then more that are just circles. So, do you go for like 6 months on just the circles, or shifting to the squares? And why do you switch back and forth between those?
I think a lot of those are going on at the same time. It's playing with scale. Sometimes I really want to do something fast, like this one, took a lot less time than like one with a lot of small pieces. But sometimes I want to spend a lot of time, almost like a puzzle, really adding one little piece at a time. But yeah, usually they're going at the same time.
So these are the rounded ones that we were talking about from before. And
Yeah.
when did you do these?
So these were all, I think, 2019 and 2020. I started doing these, and then I had a show. I did have a show coming up. I have a solo show of just the mounds at the Gadsden Museum of Art, and so that gave me like a little bit more focus on, I'm just going to do these for a while.
And then the pandemic happened.
Yeah, and then I had an opening that like was super awkward, and definitely no eating and drinking, and even I didn't even really want to go, but
it happened, which is great. A lot of things did not happen. Whoops, I apologize. My table moved and my pet parrot fell on the floor. That was that sound you just heard.
But yeah, I think that kind of goes back to the social media thing. Like a lot of people didn't actually see the actual show, but they saw the work, and they saw some of the install shots, and it's in Gadsden, Alabama, so not a lot of people couldn't go to it, pandemic or not. So this is a install shot.
And then this one, I was interested about this one. Do you do, so was this a collaborative piece? And then do you do a lot of collaborative pieces?
So it was collaborative. It's not really, it was a kind of a fundraising thing for this foundation called Keep Abreast. And it's they promote self-checking for breast cancer and breast cancer awareness. So it was all people from Nashville that were cast, and they all had either personally experienced breast cancer or had, it affected them in some way. So the person that runs the foundation kind of picked the different artists to go with the different people. So this particular woman, she's in the music industry, and she really likes jewelry. So this was a challenge. This was on plaster, so I didn't know how it was all gonna, really hold up. And the different curves and things like that. But I had her kind of tell me some colors that she was interested in, just to give me kind of a little bit of a direction, and then I went from there.
It's absolutely beautiful. And I love the story behind it as well, with such a personal touch. And then that she got the influence in the colors. Did the colors have any meaning to her?
Not that I remember. These were all auctioned off, and she purchased her own. She said she didn't want anybody else to have her boobs. So,
A reason.
Yeah.
But also she probably really likes the piece.
Yes, I think so.
So we talked all the way about up to the pandemic. Did obviously you're making art throughout the pandemic. Did the pandemic influence any ways that you went with the art, or was it more of escapism? How did the pandemic play into your art?
I definitely made a lot more art than I probably would have if I wasn't at home for 6 months. And I mean, things like this, sometimes I would intentionally want to do something really bright and happy, and whether or not I felt that way or not. But yeah, I definitely gave me lots of time.
So did you decide to, did you do, are all of these from during the pandemic, or were they, were some from before? What I'm trying to ask is, did you gravitate towards one particular type of design or particular mold or a set of molds during the pandemic? And do you think it had anything to do with, beyond just being at home, subconsciously with the pandemic?
The last couple have been from during COVID. This one is fairly recent. I think it's maybe from this year. So with this particular piece, I with several different pieces, I kind of sometimes have leftover residual paint from other pieces that stay on the molds and end up kind of transferring when I add new paint for a new piece. So that's something that I've always been interested in, is kind of having that sort of history, I guess, and connection between pieces. But I think I definitely bought some new molds, and tried some, this was I think marketed as a make your own little dog treat or something like that. But yeah, this one is several different kind of pieces from different castings collaged together. So they're all really heavily collage based, but I think this one is, more obviously collage.
Did you make dog treats before you used it for paint?
No, don't tell you know who.
So in the pandemic, we've also been spending more time on the computer and over Instagram, and we talked about how Instagram has been really important to your career. Do you think the increased visibility throughout the pandemic has really kind of taken that to another level, or was it just pretty much like a steady increase?
I don't know. I think it's just fairly steady. Yeah, it's tricky because it's just a balance of not wanting to be on there too much, but not wanting to, be absent and not like have people, not thinking about my work, I guess. So it's, I don't know. I don't think it's changed a whole lot, other than just a steady kind of increase.
And one of the last questions I have for you is, do you have any advice for students?
So kind of like what I was saying earlier, don't be shy about reaching out to other artists. Email or Instagram, and it's, even if they're in New York, or you think they're way too famous, you never know. And the other thing that I still do, and especially in my mixed media class, is just keep experimenting. Keep trying new materials, different ideas and things like that, and definitely talk to other people. I think the real challenge is when you're out of school and you don't have assignments and critiques and things like that, make sure that you kind of develop a studio practice if you have to have a schedule, or schedule studio visits and things like that, so you're not too isolated.
The biggest thing I always tell students is you still have to talk.
Yeah.
Yeah, you make the art, but then you also still have to be able to talk about the art a lot. So I said I lied. That wasn't my last question. Do you have any upcoming shows?
I don't really have much going on at the moment. I've kind of hit a wall at a point where I just kind of stopped applying for things, because it's a lot of work and a lot of overlap, with shows and things like that. That I just, I think with the Gadsden Museum and a couple other things, I kind of got a little bit burnout. But I'm excited. In January, I'm doing a week-long residency in Gatlinburg at Aramont. And we can pretty much work on whatever we want, do whatever we want. And so it's just going to be like really focused studio time.
That's excellent. Well, thank you so much, Natalie. Was there any last, I can't see the chat. So Madeline, were there any last questions?
We do not have any more questions right now.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Natalie. I love learning about your art. I always love talking to you. Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for joining us. If you were working on something during this, I never get to during these, but if you were, you can turn on your screen real quick and show us if you would like to what you were working on. But as a reminder, it was or is our last coloring night that is virtual for the semester. We do have one last one with Alex who sound like is there with you, Natalie. So that will be hi.
I'm trying
so
not to show his paintings.
Yeah, there we go. Preview. So we'll be talking to him December 1st in person. So for all of you at UAB, be sure to join us for that one, and it will not be recorded. So if you want to see it, make sure you come. So thank you, everyone. It was great seeing all of you. Thank you, Natalie, and have a good night.
Thank you. Thank you guys for coming.